So I'm a basic American kid, grew up in rural Vermont and rural Pennsylvania. Um, but as a kid, I always wanted to run something and ended up working for a Fortune 500 company. And for many years, 20 years, working with them. And I loved my jobs, loved my career. I felt like I was a good person, right? Doing good work, making a good living, chasing the American dream. All that changed, however, being a good person, when I went off to a youth mission trip. During that mission trip on a Wednesday night, my story says I met Jesus there. I came back with just a tremendous thirst for more. All of a sudden, church worship service no longer was something to endure, but something I looked forward to and couldn't wait to hear more. As I also thought back to what was going on at the church at the time, to the worship gatherings, one of the things that was consistently preached and messaged was really two things. One, the pastor did a tremendous job of always giving a vision for what the church could be, was supposed to be, why it existed. And the second thing was about the priesthood of all believers. I think those were the two. After a number of years of messages, I thought, what are the two things I would take away? Those are really important, and those are the vision. It's just so compelling. And as I began to pursue it and pray and listen and study and observe how I'm living and observe how the church was running, the dissonance, the difference between the vision and how life was lived, that just became greater over time. And our church decided, because it was growing very rapidly, it needed a role called executive pastor. I spent a lot of time talking to other people about that. There'd be retired people. I thought, boy, it's good. You're retired now. You can go spend time, working with the church. Or one of them kind of turned it back on me and said, you seem to be pretty passionate about this and have a really good understanding of what needs to happen. Why don't you consider it? And I frankly thought they were crazy. I was doing good stuff, right? But at the same time, the idea was kind of compelling. But there was a lot of practical challenges to make that switch, not the least of which is, income challenges and career aspirations and personal and family dreams. We've set our life up going one direction pretty solidly, and to consider this would be pretty much a lot to ask for not only me, but for my entire family. But my friends and people that knew me were quite disappointing in that, and they kept saying, no, I think that you'd be really good at that. I think that's something you should consider. So eventually, talking to my family, threw my hat in a ring for an interview, and trusted that whatever's supposed to happen would happen, and I wouldn't be here obviously if I said, well, they offered me the job. And I think that's when, as a family, we really had to struggle with this. And the income was probably going to be 1/3 of what I was making in the corporate world, and we'd pretty much set our life up to spend everything we were making before. But the more we talked about it, my wife was like, okay, I think, if this is what God's calling, I think we should do. And our daughter was pretty young, and she's pretty much like, whatever. But our son, who was maybe 13 or 14 at the time, really thought this was a bad idea. And, it turned out that he was able to articulate that a lot of his identity was in what I did as a profession, and the money we made, and the fact he was rich to many of his friends. And in some cases, that was very disheartening to hear, but why would it not be that way? Because that's how we were living. But it also kind of was the thing that put it over the top. I knew I wouldn't get through his part. 'Cause I remember in my head thinking, we talked about that dissonance. It does not seem like that should be the legacy that our son has. What I felt is almost an irresistible call to just follow this and trust. So to me, it was one of the first major leaps of faith that I'd say I took, and not knowing what there was to gain, being aware of what there was to lose, but just trusting it. And I'd say one thing we found, and I found, is freedom. Freedom from many of the things that might, on a day-to-day basis, used to drive me crazy. They're just not that important. One of the things we felt most nervous about making all these moves is security, right? Financial security, retirement, we could be able to pay the bills. And I can tell you, after 20-some years of this, we've paid every bill. Somehow, God's provided at every turn. You're never always sure how it's going to happen, but the stories that you get as a result are much better than our ability to gather things and hold them for ourselves. And as a result, we've grown up, I'd say, more maturely as people, but we've also grown together better through the challenges. The dreams that we had that might have died have been replaced by new dreams. Laura and I, feel like we're on a mission together. But I think the goal is more trust, and more of the kingdom here today, and people's lives today, because we need it today.